Yolanda Barona was detained and deported in 2011 for working without legal authorization. In an instant, she was forced to leave behind her two young children in San Diego. Barona was finally allowed to return in June 2022. We met her in San Isidro just as she crossed the border for the first time. Our interview was cut short when she saw her daughter and hugged her for the first time in nearly 12 years. A few months later, we caught up with Barona in her home in San Diego. She was still incredibly happy about being reunited with her children again.
For me, the most marvelous thing is to be able to kiss my children, to hug them, things that were denied to me for 11 and a half years, that were taken from me in an instant.
Barona is grateful to be back. She lives with her husband, Hector Barajas, also a former deportee, but their return, it just hasn't been what they expected.
We were homeless, like people who don't have a place to live. That was our reality. And now we are grateful for this little patio and home.
She says landlords refused to rent to them because they had no credit history. They eventually got housing through Barajas' military benefits. It's unclear exactly how many formerly deported people are allowed to return to the U.S. KPBS asked multiple federal agencies, but none of them said they tracked this data. Robert Irwin is a professor at UC Davis. In 2017, he helped start the Humanizing Deportation Project. It was just after the record number of deportations during the Obama administration, and just as former President Donald Trump was regularly demonizing immigrants.
And so some people imagined that they were just kind of criminals, or they were people who could easily readjust to life in Mexico or wherever they were going because that's where they were from.
In reality, many consider the U.S. their home. Jack Aviles was brought here when he was 6 months old. He grew up in San Diego and joined the Marines. Then, in 2001, he was deported after being charged with possession of 2 unregistered firearms. He was allowed to return in 2019, but the shadow of deportation has stayed with him.
I had to work my social, I had to establish credit, I had to rent, I had to pay bills. So all that is like, yeah, we got our to return home, but we didn't have like opportunities.
Aviles lives in constant fear of being deported again. He says he mostly keeps to himself, avoids big crowds, and does everything he can to stay out of trouble, even when he's just walking across the street.
Think about crossing the street, am I jaywalking, am I not? I mean, literally, that's how I'm very, very paranoid, because I don't want to ruin it.
Aviles thinks of himself as a patriot. He understands that deportations are necessary, especially for violent criminals with no roots in the country. But he doesn't understand why the punishment is so severe for people with nonviolent offenses. For migrants like him, who raise families, work, and make positive contributions to their communities.
I served my sentence for the crime, but then they gave you a much harsher one, which didn't make sense to us. It still doesn't. Yeah, we're grateful for the opportunity, but that didn't kind of make sense.
Family members, including American citizens, aren't spared from the trauma of deportation. Michael Paulson became a single father of 3 young boys when his wife, Emma Sanchez, was deported in 2006.
I held a full-time job, a part-time job, and I used to take the kids to Mexico on the weekend. It's pretty hard. A lot of stress, a lot of financial burdens. You got 2 rents, 2 households to stock for food.
Sanchez was allowed to return in 2018 after spending 12 years in Mexico, time her family will never get back.
I lost 12 years of my life. I should have been in a house with her already, and I had to start over. I had like no financial money saved. Everything I made, I had to spend to support the family. It's really hard, yeah. So it's like starting over. It's like 12 years of your life is gone.
During the long separation, Sanchez dreamed of the day when her family would finally be reunited again.
It feels like we are destined to continue to suffer, because you have this hope and optimism of coming back, but you get here and it isn't what you expected. In my case, my children grew up.
To ease her pain, Sanchez goes through hundreds of old family photos she keeps in boxes. They remind her of happy times, but also of what could have been. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
así o las voy pasando una por una?